So you've learned all this stuff, and then you're in the work environment and you have to deliver, in the sense that when you are in an academic program, you almost do everything. But then when you're in the work environment, the dynamics are different.
Hello, I'm Pavi, and I am going to be interviewing Kgothatso today, also known as KG. Welcome. And where are you joining us from?
Hi, Pavi. So glad to be with you today. I'm joining from Johannesburg, South Africa.
I'm excited to dig into things with you. Would you like to start off by giving an introduction of yourself?
Yeah, so as Pavi mentioned, I'm Kgothatso Lephoko. I'm also known as KG. I'm a South African user experience designer, and I've recently spent 7 months in New York in the United States pursuing my master's degree in products of design at the School of Visual Arts. And I'm delighted to be graduating this month. I am working as a user experience designer as well at the moment at Absa in South Africa. And in my spare time, I enjoy hand lettering and calligraphy and sketchnoting.
That is amazing. I'm really curious to also know about your calligraphy side. That is so cool. And congrats on getting close to graduating. That is incredible. Can you share a little bit more about how you got your first job in UX?
Yeah, absolutely. During my last year, I did my undergrad it was Bachelor of Arts in Visual Communication Design from the Open Window Institute, which is a creative tertiary institution here in South Africa. And during our final year, one of my majors was interactive design. And we had a guest lecturer for about 6 weeks or so. His name was Ves, and he was an alumni of the program, the same program that I was doing. And during his time teaching us, I suppose he recognized that I was really enjoying information architecture aspect of the work. And he had recently started working at Glucode, and they were scaling their teams. And he recognized that these might be skills that we need. And he encouraged me to apply for an internship at Glucode, which I then did. I did the internship for about a few months and then was offered the permanent position of junior information architect.
That is really cool because your instructor noticed that you had this interest in information architecture. So then you were able to land that first job. For some folks who are listening, information architecture might be a new word. Would you be able to get a little bit into what that is?
Okay, yeah, absolutely. There's an information architect who's quite prominent. Her name is Abby Covert, and she defines information architecture as almost like making sense of a mess, in the sense that before you can get to a solution, you have to understand what the problem is that you're working with. One of the examples that me understand information architecture early on was when you are building a structure, whether it's a house or an office space, you need the bones. This is where the bathroom is going to be, and this is where the kitchen is going to be. And the kitchen is going to be here because, I don't know, the pipes are here. One example in interface design is navigation. Navigation is structural because it's able to get the person who is interacting with your design to where they want to be.
Thank you so much for that analogy. I think that really helped nail down what the overarching meaning of information architecture is. And I'm really happy you touched on this topic because I think it's common to assume a certain type of job that you would get with doing design. I'm thinking about how we want to also consider options of branching out into different areas of focus, and information architecture is a very focused area. I think it's
Absolutely.
really interesting that you started off in that space.
Thank you.
And KG, would you be able to share a little bit more as to perhaps some of the challenges that you experienced?
Yes. So one of the challenges was more of a like self-confidence challenge. So you've learned all this stuff theoretically, albeit design school is also very practical. And then you're in the work environment and you have to deliver and you're getting paid. And this was me not being sure whether what I was doing was correct, in the sense that when you are in an academic program, you almost do everything or a lot of the steps. But then when you're in the work environment, the dynamics are different. You're in a team, which means that you do something, someone else does something else, and your work becomes potentially the foundation of someone else's work. And so how you're documenting and communicating the work that you've done for the benefit of other team members, that's a challenge, because we weren't necessarily taught that, because a lot of the projects were individual projects in school. So I was doing information architecture and I had team members who were doing UI design. And then there was the development team as well, where we had never really interacted with developers before within the academic environment. And so it's, oh, okay, so I can't just design everything or anything. I need to understand the constraints of the operating system. We were designing specifically for iOS at the time, and then branched out to Android to say that, oh, iOS has guidelines, and these guidelines not only guide us as designers, but also the developers. And so how do we have a conversation as to, does my design maybe in one way meet the objectives of the client, but also the internal stakeholders, which are the team, both technical and design team. So that was perhaps a challenge. And luckily, the developers were very open to understanding the design process, but also bringing us into their world as developers, so that we could work together to create the final solution, as opposed to traditionally the throwing your designs over the wall and having them thrown back at you. That wasn't the case at all at this particular company, which is something that I really appreciated and got over that hurdle of communicating with developers.
I appreciate you sharing that and being open about it, because I think self-confidence and self-doubt is definitely an ongoing problem for designers. And I think that happens no matter at what level you're in. And taking it back to folks who are first starting out, you haven't worked with a lot of these people yet, and you haven't worked across different teams, and this is all new to you. I think you spoke about one thing that helped you, which was the team's openness to get over that. Was there anything else that helped you build that self-confidence and to get more comfortable with your craft?
Yeah, so one thing that I did when I was at Glue was I reached out for mentorship, looking for mentors. And because I was specifically focused in information architecture at the time, there was an Information Architecture Institute, which I signed up to be a member to be mentored. And they connected me with someone named Jason Hobbs, who was in South Africa. So the irony there, which I laugh about, is that it took an organization in the United States to connect me with somebody who was maybe less than an hour's drive away. But through that relationship with Jason, he was able to guide me in some ways. And sometimes it's to say, oh, this is maybe a better way to do it, but other times guide me to resources online. Because another thing, like online, there's so much that sometimes you don't know where to start. It's quite overwhelming. So he was able to guide me in those ways. And then also in terms of conferences, to say, hey, maybe check out this conference. One thing that I've appreciated about people in the design community, a lot of people I've interacted with at least, is that they're very willing to give time, to have a conversation, to share tips, resources, techniques. And I think it's just the getting over the fear of reaching out to go, oh, hey, I don't know you. I really appreciate this thing that you're doing, and I just wanted to learn more. And more often than not, the response for me in reaching out to people has been like, yeah, sure, let's go for coffee. Albeit COVID times is a little bit different, but that warmth and receptiveness to share one's experience with someone else for the purposes of them growing. Yeah.
I love that. And this is really interesting because it seems like you've delved quite deep into information architecture. You found a mentor to help coach you. And again, this is like a very specific area. So now as you've progressed, is this still your interest?
I guess the one thing about the field is that, as you mentioned, information architecture is very niche, but it's very specific. And in terms of job availability, there wasn't necessarily work like information architecture jobs to say, albeit that's something that Jason was forthcoming about, because he had been in the industry for a while and he was like, I hear you that you really love information architecture, but there might be opportunities for you to practice information architecture within a role of user experience design. Yeah.
So it looks like you've taken some more of a pivot into a generalized like area in design, with your interest already being in in information architecture. So how did that feel when you understood that maybe I'm not going to have too many opportunities as an information architect, and I might have to broaden my area of expertise?
A little bit disappointing because I think as a person, I really like to go deep into a subject and then feel like this is where I add value and I'm thorough. And if you then, say, okay, in addition to information architecture, you're also doing user experience design. Some of the deliverables are similar, but maybe information architecture, you might be doing a card sort, for example, where there is no interface. And then you can say, okay, cool, based on this, I recommend what the navigation is. And then with user experience design, like it's broader, right? So there are more things to do in addition to the information architecture side of things. So then it's okay, with the same amount of time that you had to do the one thing, you have to do all these other things and wanting to do them well. But then you have timelines. And then on top of that, now it's product design, which is on top of user experience design, there's the UI design aspect of it as well. And for me, the challenge is how well can one do all those things? But more specifically for me, I'm constantly reminded that, okay, KG, done is better than perfect. Maybe you need to put something on the table to get feedback. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be polished. It can just be a conversation starter. And that has been really challenging for me. Yeah.
Absolutely. And you are preaching to the choir, my friend. In terms of the expectations that a lot of designers have right now, it's moving more towards as you being a generalist than someone who's very specifically focused in one area. And I think that's what brings up a lot of the challenges that you were mentioning about wanting to do all the things well and how deep you can go into each area. We've often heard of the term broadening your T, where you have some knowledge of all these areas, but then I guess for you, your specific area would have been information architecture. It's becoming more challenging now because the expectations with jobs is that you should be able to do all these things, and doing all these things well. I feel like that's probably going to be a whole other topic that we can probably talk for a couple other hours. And yeah, thank you for bringing that up. And I wanted to end off with asking, do you have any piece of advice that you'd like to take away from this conversation? What would that be?
I think not letting fear get in the way of you putting yourself out there. I've thought, oh man, like I'm not good enough. And because I think I'm not good enough, I don't apply for the job, or I don't reach out to this person. Oh no, I'll be wasting their time. Sometimes you're irrational in that you don't know what the outcome is going to be, but you've already convinced yourself that it's going to be negative. And so that gets in the way of a potential learning experience or meeting someone. I think that would be the advice, just putting oneself out there. And sometimes it is a no, but that doesn't mean that it'll be a no with every other person you reach out to. It just means that that one was a no. One thing, I've really been fortunate to have people in my corner that have been very motivating, mentors. I mentioned Jason, but Farai has been a mentor, a colleague and friend now, Jacqueline, has been a mentor, just really encouraging me where I am. That maybe that would be the piece of advice, that where you are is perfect, because as a fourth year student, I'm not 10 years into my career. It doesn't mean that what I know doesn't add value. It doesn't mean that the experiences that I have can't make a difference. It's that where you are, appreciate that you're on a journey, appreciate that you're going to fail, and keep moving. Where you are is good enough. And from where you are, there is a lot that you're able to do that you probably couldn't be doing a few months ago or a few years ago. I suppose in our minds, there are people that we are inspired by, and we look at their work and it's just, whoa, I want to be there. And then we almost diminutize where we are. So it's important that we appreciate where we are and the value that we can add at that point.
I absolutely love that. And I think that could literally be the quote for designers: appreciate where you are, because there is a lot that you can accomplish from where you are. So I think this is a really good self-check. And thank you so much, KG. This was such a great conversation that I had with you. I'm sure a lot of people are going to find this extremely helpful. Thank you so much for your time. It was great chatting with you.
Thank you so much for yours as well.